allocation to the road maintenance fund, but the money is not being used to maintain the streets of Freetown. We saw a list of 42 streets being rehabilitated, and the exclamation was, we will deliver. Hashtag we will deliver. Congratulations, President Bio, for keeping your promise to rehabilitate the Kenema roads. Something doesn't feel right, because if we have Freetown as our capital city, as the gateway to the country, and you see Eastern Police, literally the roundabout by Eastern Police where the clock tower is, you see the road infrastructure totally destroyed. You see water oozing out because of effectively the crater. It's so open. If there is no investment in maintaining our capital city, when we know that our residents are paying their monies towards the road maintenance fund, I think it's a cause for concern.
We've done quite a number of stories with regards to the deployable nature of roads across Freetown, one of which is that of Circular Road.
Yes.
I did a story on Circular Road.
Yes.
And quite recently, a colleague of ours, Issa Bangura, did a story about Bome. I mean, that's an intersection between Ferry Junction
yes.
and that of Upgon. And we see government embarked on a quick fix,
yes.
which is still a problem, because I passed there just yesterday, and you see the road is still not in its proper state. But the question is, what has been the strategic moves you've made, more so when you're the mayor of Freetown City, to ensure that central government sees the need to have a permanent solution to this problem that seems much more unsolved within Freetown?
Well, I think to answer that question, I want to put it into perspective.
Great.
And the perspective I want to put it in is that the issue with our road and the lack of maintenance of our roads is not an isolated challenge.
Right.
We see an overall failure to prioritize those things which should be prioritized by government. We know that just a few weeks ago, government went to Parliament to do a supplementary budget. What you might not realize is that in that supplementary budget, we saw a slashing of the items which are meant to be priority. So let me just give you an example. So here we have the Feed Salon, government's flagship. The budget for 2025 was 747 million new leones, which is billion old leones. That was the budget, January to December 2025. Let me say it again, 747 million new leones, 747 million old leones, 747. In the supplementary budget, that funding was reduced to 91. So from 747 to 91, that is over a 600 million old leones billion reduction in what is the flagship project of the government. At the same time, we saw an increase in the budget for the office
of the president
from 79 million old leones to 255 million new leones, rather 79 million new leones to 255 million new leones. And when it comes to the local councils, today is the 8th of December. September. I'm reading December here. Today is the 8th of September. Freetown City Council, the capital city, the city that the government, the Ministry of Local Government says needs to be split in two because we're unable to deliver services. We just talked about the road infrastructure, which is not delivered by council. It is delivered by a government entity. So, and it is clearly not being funded. But for us, as a city council, our annual devolved funds, the funds from government to us, Freetown City Council, for this year, we're in September, the 8th of September, we have received 1 quarter of that allocation. But guess what? Bambali District has received nothing. Ward C has received nothing. Cariner has received nothing. So we are talking about the beginning of the final quarter of the year, and no allocation has been made by government. So your question to me is, what should I do to ensure that the road maintenance is done? And I am putting to you that if the government's own flagship project, if the funding for it has been reduced from 747 million billion old leones to a mere 91 million new leones, then clearly there's a prioritization issue. And I don't think, with all due respect, that as the mayor of Freetown, I'm sure the Minister of Agriculture is also advocating for his budget spend. So if he is sitting in cabinet and his budget has been reduced to that extent, then I think what I can do as the mayor is what I'm doing now, raising the issue, advocating for my residents, because it is my responsibility to make sure that the residents of Freetown receive what they deserve. If they are paying for their road taxes, if they're paying for their individual driver's license, if they're paying a contribution whenever they fuel their vehicles, and that money is meant to go to the maintenance of the roads in Freetown, then it is my responsibility as the mayor to highlight this issue and say to government, behind doors as well as in front, as I'm doing now, to the general public, because I'm elected for that reason, that this is unacceptable.
Just last week, we hosted the Minister of Finance in our studio, and I asked him this question with regards unavailability of funds for local councils across the country, because service delivery is extremely paramount in the operations and activities of all of these councils we're talking about. And his response was, allocations have been made to the respective councils.
Well, I can tell you that we have received our first quarter, but this is the fourth quarter of the year.
What sort of an effect has that had?
Of course, it has a huge effect. It has less of an effect in Freetown simply because we've been very proactive. And as many people will remember, although it was actually really challenged by the Minister of Local Government back in June 2020, when we introduced the digitalized property rate system, by using our innovation, by using our own resource mobilization to be able to develop that system, it has meant that council has had more resources available to continue to deliver services. We are not reliant only on government allocation, but there are certain functions which are, dependent, because the money that's coming from government is not for general use of council. It's called devolved funds, and it goes to specific areas. Specifically, one of them, a topic of this morning, is education.
Sure.
But I want to tell you that the full budget that comes to council for the entire year 2025 was a mere 2.6 billion old leones, 2.6 million new leones. And that money is money which has to be allocated to 806 schools. And I also want to point something out to you, because I think it's important for us to recognize this. When you look at the devolved functions in the Local Government Act, they are sadly very unclear in terms of scope. So let me just read out to you what it says in the schedule of the Local Government Act in respect of education. And I come back to this question of, when you are in governance, prioritization means that one of the things that should happen is clarity on roles and responsibilities to ensure effective service delivery. What we have under the third schedule of the Local Government Act, functions devolved to local councils, Ministry of Basic and Secondary Education. We have 3 lines. The first line says district education schools. The second line says DEC primary and mid-secondary schools. And the third line says district libraries. That's all it says. It doesn't say what we're meant to do in respect of the schools, and there brings elements of lack of responsibility and accountability. Because if you have 3 lines, if you just literally say DEC primary and mid-secondary schools, over time, what has transpired is that there is an expectation that the city councils, the local councils, are responsible for infrastructure maintenance, responsible for providing tables and chairs, furniture, providing supervision of external exams. But it might surprise you to know that at 2.6 million new Leones of a budget annually to the city council for those devolved funds, with 806 schools, that comes to less than 1,000 Leones per school per quarter, per term.
The Minister of Local Governments.
Did that sink in?
Yes, it does.
Did it sink in?
Yes, it does.
So what does one do with that?
The Minister of Local Governments and Worship is on record to have said that revenue collection models of Freetown City Council seem not impressive, and as a result, that's one of the reasons why Council is unable to address the many issues that Freetonians do face. I know from the submissions you've made, it seems Council is constrained in terms of funds to adequately roll out key projects that you've promised over time for Freetonians.
Well, I'd like to say that I think what would be really helpful, let me just pull out, because when one speaks, it's really important that one makes reference to facts and not make unsubstantiated statements. So I will just share with you, if I may, the figures for Freetown City Council revenue from 2018, when I became mayor, to what it is to date. So in 2018, the budget of City Council was 40 million. I'm going to use new Leones, okay? Was 40 million new Leones, of which 43% was own source revenue, i.e. the money that council itself generates. 43% of 40 million. In 2018, when I became the mayor, I took up office in May of that year. And as you can imagine, I would need to get my feet under the table. By the next year, we had increased that revenue to 55 million. In 2020, of which 56% was own source. So you moved from 43 to 56. In the following year, 2020, that was the year when we introduced the new property rate system, and unfortunately, the Minister of Local Government, as you will all vividly remember, stopped us from collecting our property rate for an entire year. So our revenue at that time came back to about 42 million Leones, but even then it was still 56% coming from own source revenue. By the time we got to 2024, moving with this trajectory, using now our new system, our revenue in 2024 was 70 million. That's almost double what it was in 2018. And of that amount, 62% came from own source revenue. In our budget for this year, our budget this year is 98 million. That is way more than double what it was when I became mayor in 2018.
Absolutely.
And of that amount, 75% is own source revenue. No, in fact, it's more than 75. It's about 77% is own source revenue. So with all due respect, let's talk about the facts and the figures. We are a public institution. Therefore, our financial statements are available to the general public. Not only are they available, they are audited. So what we're talking about can be verified. So to say that we have not been able to raise the revenue as council is a little bit inaccurate. But not only that, not only has our system been so effective in increasing revenue, our system has now received so much attention and recognition that this same system that we resource mobilized for, we raised the funding from FCDO by putting together first a pilot to show the viability of it. That was back in 2019, 2020. This same system has now been so recognized that the World Bank is supporting the Ministry of Finance to roll out our system, the mob tax system. Mob tax 2 is being rolled out in Kenema, in Bo, in McKinney, with the Ministry of Finance, with World Bank funding. But we've also been recognized internationally. It's also been rolled out in Malawi and in other countries. So our system was innovative, it was equitable, and it took the property rate landscape in Africa to a different level. And it's a system which has meant that in a year like this, when in September we have only received 1/4 of our allocation, Freetown City Council has not shut down. In 2018, when I became mayor, when allocations didn't come from government, we literally had to go back and forth, back and forth. There were times when we couldn't pay salaries. That is no longer the case with Freetown City Council. But what is the case with Freetown City Council is that the population of our city has increased exponentially from 2018 to now. Demands on services have increased, and key functions have failed to be devolved to council, making the delivery of our services more challenging. The basic and most fundamental urban management tool that any local council has is the ability to manage the land. And if you look at I was showing you in the Local Government Act, that was what I was sharing with you just before we moved on to this, but I was sharing with you the responsibilities. I spoke about education, but if you look at what it says under Ministry of Lands, in terms of a devolved function to the local councils, it says under Ministry of Lands, strategic local plans, sand dues not applicable to us, and importantly, what is applicable to us, preparation of land use plans. We have not, as local councils, been allowed to exercise this mandate. And as a result, the roads that you see on that video show the poor state of roads, or the documentary shows the poor state of roads. But there is something else which could be shown when you talk about road infrastructure, and that is the lack of access, the lack of roads into over 40% of the populations of Freetown have no road access. So if you have no road access, how do you dispose of waste?
I may also hold you there for a minute, Madam Mayor, simply because we have a range of things that we are supposed to discuss about, from issues of roads, sanitation, and also the local tax. But quickly, since you have been talking about the aspects of education, I may want to have your opinion on the current issue, with the SLTU. As today is the actual date for the opening of schools, and we see where teachers are complaining about the welfare and salaries. What are your take on that?
Well, I think this comes back to this question of prioritization. So, we just talked about the fact that the feed salon budget was slashed. I've told you that, we've got councils across the country who have not received any allocation. Freetown City Council has received 1/4 in the final quarter of the year. So you really have to ask yourself the question, if government is doing a supplementary budget in which the allocation to the office of the chief minister increased from, let me just get the exact figure, I wouldn't want to misquote, From 24 million new Leones, it went up to 31 million new Leones. But at the same time, we are unable to pay school subsidies for 2 terms, you know, for the second and the third term. It required the SLTU taking this drastic action, really a cry for help, to say we can't continue. This is free quality education without the quality, without the free and without the quality. Because if you don't give school subsidies, if you don't give the allocation to the local councils for education, and the schools also do not receive the school subsidies, and I'm speaking to teachers, I was speaking to a teacher last week, a secondary school teacher, who says that he and many of his colleagues had still not been paid their July salaries. So I think that the challenge that we have here is a proclamation of something being a flagship, a priority, but the reality, you know, people say, put your money where your mouth is. If you say this is a priority, then we should see that funding being moved. That should be the priority. Everything else should be deprioritized. But if you are able to prioritize spending at the level of the office of the president, the office of the chief minister, and yet you're not able to pay school subsidies, then one really has to ask yourself the question, where do the priorities lie?
On that note, let's come to the aspect of sanitation. Many communities still complain of poor or irregular waste. How do you respond to that? As quite recently we saw you were moving or pushing something which has to do with the Dirty Must Go project.
Yeah, so Dirty Must Go is our campaign name for the implementation of our new bylaws. And I think, you know, it's important for us to recognize that when you need to change behaviors, and particularly with waste management, it's a whole chain, value chain. And I must say, this is a value chain that has been obstructed. This is a value chain that has suffered from some of these prioritizations that we're talking about. Let me remind us that there's behavior is the principal driver of, or sort of mindset is the principal driver of behavior, right? What you believe, what you think, how you process things impacts what you actually do. So in 2019, we came up with a behavior change strategy, the cleanest zone competition. AYV was a big partner with us on that. We were able to subdivide the city into the zones, incentivize our residents to change their behaviors by introducing sustainable waste practices, and incentivize them by giving them prizes. Now, this was 2019, very successful. It became the talk of the town. People were really, it was really sort of like being internalized. 2020 comes, we start the exercise, but what also happens? We are stopped from collecting revenue, which means we don't have the resources to be able to deliver the prizes. And of course, that slashes belief and trust in the process. And because we went through that whole year without revenue, the knock-on effect has to be understood. You know, you think, oh, it was just 1 year. No, because it takes time for people to come back from being told, do not pay property rates. And they weren't just told once. You as SLBC yourselves, you might recall, you actually had a tag, a ribbon along the bottom of the page when you were doing your news saying, do not pay property rates. So that mentality, it took a long time. Even when we were told, yes, you can go ahead and collect property rates, we met resistance. We met resistance because nobody wants to pay taxes in the first place. It's with bottom one slide and shake tick. You know, it's like, no, they're not being told, we say we for pay too now. So that build up of our property rate, it took a while. And in the meantime, of course, you have other objectives that come up. Another element of our sanitation system, which was key, there are 2 elements which suffered greatly. One was the transfer station. Very famously, I believe many people remember, that day, this was UK government funded. We went through all the processes. That site at Jomo Kenyatta Road, we were made to understand, was private property. Or in fact, it was disputed between council and private property. A transfer station was under construction. The then Minister of Lands, Dennis Sandy, came with soldiers and destroyed it in view of a cameras, media. Destroyed what was this transfer station construction to enable the tricycle groups to not have to travel long distances, to be able to quickly come, deposit their waste, and then go and be able to do more households in the same period of time. What's the upshot of that? Today, that site is abandoned. It's now become an illegal dump site. Also, after what was effective about 8 months before we were able to continue that project under the support, with the support of the Vice President, who actually, enabled us to move forward with other sites. 8 months later, those constructions happened. We did the opening, but guess what happened then? Within council, through the sabotage that we were experiencing, very well publicized, we were always on the news, unfortunately, at that time, those transfer stations were never operationalized. They became white elephants. Today, thankfully, we're able to reverse that, and they will soon be part of the infrastructure for the Dotty Must Go campaign. But the third and very important element of our sanitation value chain, which was frustrated, and let's be very clear about this, is that when it comes to the bomber you just talked about, nobody wants in modern day times to have open dumping. Who does that? These are dump sites that have been around for 35 years. And they are well past their sell-by date, if you can call it that. And so in 2020, we were thrilled that as part of the Russell P. project, Resilient Urban Sierra Leone project, the World Bank allocated and approved, I underline the word approved, $20 million for use by City Council, Freetown, and Ward C for a sanitary landfill. That would have been a game changer for us when it comes to sanitation. The only thing that needed to happen was the government needed to provide the land.
A space.
The land was identified in Hastings. It was land that was owned, we were told, by the Ministry of Defense. And the Ministry of Defense, the local government ministry, and the Ministry of Finance, because Ministry of Finance is the entity, the national entity through which the World Bank is implementing the Russell P. project, because it affects not just Freetown, but other cities, secondary cities in the country. Sadly, after considerable back and forth, I can't tell you how many meetings I participated in respect of this issue. In October 2024, the World Bank, 4 years later, was left with no option but to withdraw that $20 million for the sanitary landfill because the land documents, unencumbered land documents, proof of title, were not provided. When you talk about waste management in Freetown, and I highlight to you challenges around the behavior change, challenges around the transfer station model, which means that we are still using the dump site, which means that the tricycles that we had put into the market were unable to survive because of the state of that dump site. But today, Dotty Must Go is our answer. And Dotty Must Go has meant that we have come in with new legislation. We've looked at this whole ecosystem and we've said, in the light of all the challenges that we have, what can be done? And what can be done is the legislation was changed. And I must commend the Ministry of Local Government for that, because we as council cannot go to Parliament on our own according to our laws in Sierra Leone. We must go through the Ministry of Local Government. And they went with us.
Absolutely.
And they were able to stand alongside us, and that law matured in April of this year. Now we're working out on the implementation. And why is the law so important? Because the law moves the offense from us having to catch an offender to us being able to insist legally now on every household being registered for waste collection.
Madam Mayor, quickly before we call for the video of which we've been discussing about, another issue of sanitation has to do with the aspect of cops being seen all across the country, and the issue of Kush is still up for debate. What would you say to speak on that issue, being the fact that you're the mayor, and on a daily, when I move across Freetown from Godrich to Congo Coast Bridge and other specific area points, you see dead bodies?
Well, Marina, I'll say two things. The first one, I will ask you a question, Marina. Marina, I'm sure you're probably now, I'm guessing, I hope I don't get your age wrong, you're a beautiful young woman, I'm guessing you're in your 30s?
Absolutely.
There you go. Marina, in all your 30 plus years, have you ever known a situation in this country or any other country where seeing dead bodies on the street is something that is raised as a sanitation issue? Have you ever known a situation where it is normal to see dead bodies on the street on a weekly basis, on a daily basis?
No, it's not.
No. Marina, it's not normal. And so the first thing is, this is an abnormal occurrence and it needs to be seen as such. The second is, for the avoidance of doubt, I went through the Local Government Act again yesterday for good reason. Because I wanted to just be absolutely certain in my mind that there was nowhere where local councils are instructed to collect the bodies or corpses on our streets. And you know why it's not in the Local Government Act? Because it's not anticipated as a normal occurrence in the life of any locality. It is not normal, Marina, for us to have our youth, our future, the next generation lying dead on our streets. It is not normal. And it cannot be normalized by us just now picking them up as if we're picking up trash on a daily basis. Those young people are not our trash. They are our future.
Okay.
I wish we proceed to have the video with regards the deplorable condition of roads across Freetown, which seem a concern to many Freetonians.
Of course it is.
It seems a concern. But again, Her Worship, do you wish, does council wish to reinitiate taxes, the body taxes for Freetonians?
You mean the local tax?
Local taxes, so, for residents with a Freetown, because it's also another means of generating revenue for council to execute its functions.
Right. Let's just put that into context. I want us to know I want us to know that local tax is at 5 leones.
Absolutely.
It's not 5,000 because 1,000 is our old money. It's at 5 leones. I want us to know that it was at 5 leones in 2004 when the Local Government Act was originally passed. 2004 to 2025, it's 21 years. The level of inflation that has happened in that period of time. FCC raised this as a concern in 2021, I believe it was. And we were allowed to increase our local tax to 10 leones. The following year, and that's what the Local Government Act says actually. It says local tax is a local tax and it can be determined at the level of the local council. The following year, the Minister of Local Government, who had allowed us to increase the local tax, then came back and reversed and went to 10, told us we must stay at 5 leones. Keeping local tax at 5 leones means that at this point in time, the cost of the staff in the local tax department, their salary cost, is about the same as the value of the tax that if everybody was to pay. We're not saying we're not asking Freetonians to pay, but I'm just trying to point out to you that the cost of collecting that tax at the level it is now, even though we discuss this collectively as the local government family at our IMC meeting with the vice president January before last, nothing has moved on this. I'm of the view that it is critically important that all residents pay their local tax. We are promoting the payment of local tax through mobile money because that's a lower cost of collection. But it makes no sense for you to prioritize something which actually it accounts for less than, I think it's less than 2% of our revenue. I told you where our revenue is. That revenue comes from property rates, but it comes from business license, but it's about everybody participating. And so we are totally supportive and continue to advocate for our residents to pay their local tax. But people will complain because they'll say for them to come to council to pay their local tax, transport from Calabar Town to Freetown City Council is about 100 leones for them to come and pay 5 leones. And this is also the case of us moving. So we are still, of course, collecting our local tax. We're still collecting it. But I want to just say, why would the Ministry of Local Government insist on us maintaining our local tax at the level it was 21 years ago? And then in the same breath, say on your program that the city council is ineffective in collecting taxes to deliver services to our residents. But you are trying to prevent us from moving our tax level to a level which is commensurate with where inflation is today. When people were buying rice in 2018 at 250 leones a bag, you know, their minimum wage was at a particular level. I mean, today that minimum wage has moved, but it's the price of rice has moved higher than the minimum wage because the minimum wage is 800 leones, and a bag of rice, you can pay 1,000 leones for a bag of rice. So if we recognize those movements, and yet you still want FCC to collect local tax in Freetown, the capital city, where the cost of living is, so one plate of cookery is on average 40 leones, but you are insisting that we maintain local tax at 5 leones for the entire year. Somebody is paying for a plate of cookery for 1 day for 40 leones, but you want council to collect local tax from that same person 5 leones for the entire year. And then you want to come on, you know, Good Morning Sierra Leone, or is it Wake Up Sierra Leone, and say that the mayor is ineffective in collecting revenue. I think we really need to take a holistic view of what it is that we're trying to do, what it is we're trying to achieve. If we really want our residents, as I do, to all feel like they have a stake, because not everybody is a property owner, not everybody is a business owner, but every resident of Freetown should feel, as they did in 2004, that 5 leones that they paid in 2004, it meant something to them. It was an annual tax.
Okay.
So if in 2025 we want to have an annual tax that means something, let's put it at a level that is meaningful. We actually only recommended 20 leones for the entire year, but we were told we could not do it.
Okay, on that note, Madam Mayor, I would like to hold you there and quickly get the video, and when we come back, we wrap up the program.
The road from barracks to upground, the road not okay. Not fine, with the really slim. They make the machine and they say, machine the fuel. They beg to Papa government to let make the road for it.
I mean, I deliver. They won't go and they want to study. But this way, they don't this old road, most carry the 12 and the old road so gota the old. Then Bokuna the old road. With the 12 most carry, they get too much accident, the bank bike money, because of the road, to the road back.
From upbound to Shell Old Road, we get a lot of challenges. One of the time we see
people and set of people when they come, they mean to go and they dig there. Where they come in, will get the lot of for no wait, and then say no, not to business. Our government okay do. Some of the time we say then MP workers, and the type of friend the electrical network system. Then dig there, then do what they want for do. End of the day, they don't make it.
Mina Councillor Shakudin Mastabe, where we said I'm in Kenya community. The status of the roads and this week community, particularly the main one, road is now in Kenya road. A major. The first year when we count the intervention for me, yesterday they come and stop and say they don't give this road to Chinese. They want to construct a lot of no spare resources. We not see forthcoming. They can do survey 1 and 2 months and they don't put back in and say they can't start. And even give me time for start this road. Enough forthcoming. The other year again when we come again as community for start for patch again, they come again with the same initiative so they can make this road. For them even most car pass the street, bike, the kaya. And if not for the accidents, you no go pass a single day, bike no dey follow.
Many thanks, indeed, to I think the 1 minute reunion.
Yeah.
1 minute reunion for putting together that piece of art. It captures a number of
areas.
Across.
It's very disheartening to see.
And interestingly, I think I've been a victim of same. However, I think I was working at night and I fall. Yes, sure. I've been a victim of same.
Wow.
And I think it's not just me, but most times when in our studio, people ask the question that the mayor has talked a lot about transforming Freetown, what has actually transformed, when in actual fact, this is the current outlook of what we have as a city. It seems worrying for even yourself.
Of course. So, I mean, you see what's transformed. We have built, a primary school in a deprived community like Krube. We've transformed schools like E.B. Williams that were concrete or metal into 2-story buildings. We have built the first ever wastewater treatment plant, which is a huge intervention when it comes to our ability to manage liquid waste. We have built the markets in Wilberforce, which is a huge improvement on what that community had and has. We've introduced a new bylaw in waste management. We've planted 1.2 million trees. We have created 10,000 plus jobs, and these are real jobs. So we have done a massive amount within the city. But as you rightly say, for as long as the road maintenance, the pavement rehabilitation maintenance is not within the control of council, and we see this total lack of investment, total lack of prioritization, it is difficult for the visual look of the city. We've created green spaces. We've created green spaces at Hannah-Becker Street. You might recall that the Aberdeen roundabout used to be just a mess with old vehicles and waste. It is now a beautiful green space. So there is so much that has been done. And yet, if the overall road infrastructure in the city, if the pavements, the road furniture continue to be in this deplorable state, then that is what will catch the eye, and not the things which are sort of less visible. For example, I was the person who was able to lead the raising of $3.5 million to start our first ever postgraduate school for gynecologists. Today we have 8 qualified gynecologists. I was so proud when we had in fact today they're coming to give me an award for that. Those are things that you might not see with your eye, but they are transformative, because it means that it's reducing the number of women who are dying in childbirth. But when you see the roads like that, then you ask yourself the question, where's the transformation? But this is where I always come back to roles and responsibilities. Dividing Freetown in two is not the issue. Absolutely not. These functions are not being done by the City Council. These are central government functions, and they are not being done. So the central government, dividing the city in two, is not addressing the challenge. That is purely a political play, which we will continue to push against. Because if you cannot pay your devolved allocations to the city councils, to the existing local councils, and you want to create more, then you are just compounding an existing problem. And I don't think that is in the interest of the residents of Freetown, nor is it in the interest of the citizens of Sierra Leone.
Okay, quickly, as we're about to wrap up this segment, because we have, another topic to discuss about this morning, we may just take one or two messages from our Facebook page. This one is from Michael Kano, and he's saying the nation needs honest people. To be honest with you, people are serving their interests instead of the nation.
Khalid Silvanus Hardin says, Madam Mayor, I just want to remind you about salad ground markets that was burnt down in 2016. The person is saying, it's not clear. I'm having an issue.
Yeah, me too. Okay. Another one is from Mark 10. He's saying, watching Kush affected people pick rotten food from dumps is heartbreaking. How did it come to this? The government can stop this deadly drug, but they do nothing. Our politicians and oppositions have failed this nation.
Continue.
Another one is from Usman Prince, and he's saying we are not innovative because we could never place street meters in center zones for people to pay when they park on the streets. Another way to raise revenue. Another one from Hardin is saying, Madam Mayor, what about salad ground markets? I may just take one or two more. Duarte Koroma is saying, I think one of the responsibility of the FCC is by ensuring that the city's plan aligns with national development goals. What finances, there's a major progress, but why are the roads neglected? Shaku Ture saying, without controversy when it comes to delivery, Madam Ibn Akisora has delivered more than the central government. Another one is saying they gave mayor the cow and government holding the rope. And someone is asking, what is the current situation of the cable car project? I think because of time, we may want you to just respond.
I'll do that really
quickly,
quickly. Yes. Okay. So for salad ground market, for those of you who don't know, is near Garrison Street, sort of off ECOWAS Street. Caller, you'll be pleased to know, and please also bear this in mind. To build Wilberforce Market, it's cost us 5 million new leones, 5 billion old leones. So these are not small amounts. Our annual budget this year is 98 million new leones, 98 billion old leones. This is as council. So think about that as a percentage. So it's not as though there's, as I've said, and this is at a time when government has not made any allocations, and we've seen the feed salon interventions, the budget slashed from 747 to 91 million new leones. So callers, let's all bear in mind that Freetown City Council is operating within the economy of Sierra Leone. We're dealing with the price inflations of cement, of iron rods, and all of that. But that notwithstanding, I just want to let you know that Salad Ground Market, Garrison Street Market, is among the markets that we have chosen as council to invest in and rebuild within the course of the next couple of years. So we actually are working now. I was part of a site visit to the market about a month ago, and our engineering team are working on plans for that market. So that's the first thing. The person who asked about Kush and said opposition is doing nothing. Well, I want to challenge that respectfully. I think the fact that we are speaking out is precisely what can be done. I'm here on national television. I was on Liberty the other day. I have written articles. I have engaged government. I'm not quite sure where your sort of the misalignment is happening, because the responsibility for stopping Kush is a law enforcement one which sits with central government. And I will say again that what we really need to do in respect of this Kush crisis is to stop the supply chain. This isn't just about awareness raising. We will raise awareness. We will continue to speak to young people. I was in Waterloo on Friday doing, as part of the unveiling of the Waterloo Football Club, and I spoke to those young men. You know, I encourage them to stay on the straight and narrow, to use sport as an alternative to going down the route of Kush. We will continue to have walks, campaigns, media campaigns, but what we really need is political will to stop the supply of Kush. Kush is available in every market. Women are selling Kush, children are selling Kush. This is unacceptable. We need law enforcement to come down heavily, and we need, as citizens of this country, to see that happening. And when it comes to the CBD, parking meters was mentioned. Caller, you'll be pleased to know, or texter, you'll be pleased to know that even though, and I say this in respect of water provision, because Guma Valley is responsible for water provision in the city, but that doesn't mean the city council doesn't seek to, you know, find resources to build boreholes, you know, to connect public taps and so on, invest in water kiosks, which we have done, over 150 water points within the city. But in the same way, in spite of the fact that I've explained our role from the perspective of roads, that doesn't stop us from seeking to support SLRA and SLRSA. And in the Central Business District, we have done exactly that. We've been able to gain support from the City of Zurich, and just last week, Monday, we actually had a public disclosure of stakeholder engagement about the Central Business Regeneration Project that we have embarked on in collaboration with SLRA and SLRSA. And that project will see the institution of controlled parking zones within the Central Business District. So to your point, this is something caller or texter, this is something we have been concerned about. But again, it takes time to work on these collaborations. The roads, somebody said the roads are neglected. Yes, that is precisely the point that we've been making this morning. And that is, to us, a real source of concern, because we see payments being made by the residents of Freetown to the Road Maintenance Fund, and yet we do not see maintenance of the roads in Freetown. And finally, on the cable car. The cable car, the feasibility study was successfully completed last year. The report was delivered to His Excellency, the Vice President, in the presence of the Ministry of Finance. In fact, the Minister himself was not at that meeting. We subsequently, with the manufacturer, with the companies, the C40 cities, who financed $1.1 million plus, financed the feasibility study. We successfully delivered all the reports to the Minister of Finance, along with an offer of financing from a government. I've been following up continuously. This project is fundable. We have money on the table. We have been waiting for 9 months for government to respond to that offer of funds. I will be following up with the minister, as I constantly do, but I'll be following up with a letter, because it's in the interest of all Freetonians and Sierra Leone for this cable car project to be allowed to be executed. I'm really not clear as to where we have funding offered, why as a government, and it's concessional funding, why as a government we have not responded to that. I hope it's not political. I hope it's not to enable, you know, many people to continue to be writing, where the cable car, where the cable car. I believe at this point in time, it's a win-win for government and for Freetown City Council for the cable car project to be allowed. We have spent, governments that are supportive of this country have spent over $1 million on that feasibility study. I am sure government, our government, would not want that feasibility study funding to go in vain.
Indeed, that's the expectation of every other Sierra Leonean. We say thank you so very much for your time this morning. It's been an amazing interactions with you this morning. And we hope most of the problems we've highlighted this morning will be resolved by both council and central government.